welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited to have one of the strongest women I've come across in a long time, Dr. Jan Canty. Hi, Dr. Jan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. So I would like, because your story is so profound, I would like you to introduce who you are, especially at this stage of your life, to the audience.
Well, I'm a force to be reckoned with. I've had my life challenges. I started out, fortunately, very positive. I had a great family. I couldn't have asked for a better family, better parents. Thank God, because they prepared me for this major event that happened in my early 30s. Life was clicking along. I was in my doctoral program. I was married. I was in my 11th year of marriage to a man 18 years older than me in Detroit. And one evening, he didn't return home. And at first, I thought it was the weather because it was really bad out. It was a hailstorm in July. And there was no internet, no cell phones. This is prehistoric times, you know. So I couldn't figure it out for quite some time. And in about 10 days, I got a phone call from the Detroit Homicide Division asking me to come down to headquarters. And at that point, I knew that my life was going to take a pivot in a negative direction and that I was in for the fight of my life, emotionally speaking. And it turned out to be tough, but I made it.
Yeah. Okay. So how much would you like to share today?
Oh, um, anything is fine that you want to ask. The only thing I don't talk about is my current children. I don't want them bothered.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So I do want to say, I did notice your books on your
Oh,
website. So these were inspired by what you experienced?
not initially. I mean, I went, I guess you could say, off the grid for 30 years. I did not speak of it to a soul. I moved away, changed my name, changed careers. Nobody in my new environment knew about it. And I eventually moved away from there because the weather was really harsh. But the people I loved my job, but I couldn't take the humidity and the frozen winters. So I moved away. But I did not speak of it for 30 years. I was in a recovery state, really. I didn't put my finger on it at the time, but I was trying to piece myself back together and find a way to weave it into my life story because it just stuck out as this abnormal chapter in my life. What I did was I fell back on an old model that I had been taught in grad school called the biopsychosocial model, in which you deal with yourself. If you want long lasting, durable change, you deal with yourself psychologically, cognitively, and physically, or socially and cognitively and physically. And I was teaching cross cultural psychotherapy in my new setting. And so I thought, I'm going to travel the world to go to really remote places and learn what I can about trauma from another point of view. And boy, was that eye opening. Oh my God, I cannot put into words how life changing that was. When I came back from these travels, and I'm talking about places with no electricity, no clean water, no paved roads, no rights for women, nothing. I came home and I'm like, this isn't so bad. I've got running water. I've got a toilet that flushes. I've got paved roads, a car, my education, the police back me up. I have rights as a woman. I have a roof over my head. I am safe where I'm living. It could be worse. That was life changing. Then I joined a gym and I fell into a group of wonderful women. So we met 6:30 in the morning, 4 mornings a week religiously. I mean, if you didn't show up, you'd better have a really good explanation.
Hey there, feel like something's holding you back from your best life? What if you could discover your secret weapon for personal growth in less than 5 minutes? Introducing the Discover Your Personal Growth Superpower Quiz. It's your key to unlocking hidden strengths, identifying your unique motivators, and supercharging your success. Are you a determined overcomer, a purposeful planner, or maybe an authentic explorer? Don't let another day slip by feeling unfulfilled. Head to angelawadley.com and take the quiz. Don't be the only one who doesn't know their superpower. Discover it now.
And we ended up in our third year of doing that to do triathlons. And that was so exciting to be in a group of can-do women that had that attitude. And we pledged each other we would not let each other cross the finish line alone. That was rather cool. So that was the physical dimension, but I did not yet realize the social cognitive part was missing until many years later when I had a relative, Holly Dubois, who owns a crime scene cleanup company in South Carolina, recommend I do a podcast for other homicide survivors. And I'm like, I've been listening to podcasts. I don't know a thing about them. But she kept on me, and I looked into it, and I had some help along the way. Javier Laiva of Pretend Radio was a big help to me, gave me a boost, helped me learn the ropes. And I'm still doing it now, 5 years later. It's in 22 countries. And I have made the most amazing acquaintances. It's a network that brought me over the finish line in my mind. That was the missing piece. I have met people from all walks of life, all kinds of countries, all kinds of circumstances. I admire them. I appreciate them. And it has really delivered the missing piece that I needed to be where I am today.
Yeah.
And at 73, I'm doing okay. My cancer relapsed, but I'm going to lick that again. And I just joined a gym again. I have a phenomenal garden that I absolutely love. I adopted 2 biracial sisters that were, I was introduced to them because their mother had been murdered and their father was incarcerated. So they were orphans, basically. And they felt, I heard about you and you have this background and maybe you can help them because they got to deal with this as they get a little bit older. And I love my children. I love them to pieces. And in fact, when I was going through my stem cell transplant, my youngest of the 2 gave up her life to be my caregiver because nobody else was in a position to do it. And she was only 22. 3 months, she took care of me day and night. And
Yeah.
this always makes me choke up. I remember looking at her beautiful face. And I said, I feel you look so tired. I hope I haven't put too much on your young shoulders. And she looked at me and she said, Mom, you saved my life. And now I'm going to save your life. I mean, that's the kind of bond we have. I've never forgotten it. In fact, I just saw her yesterday. She came over for the 4th of July with her child, my granddaughter. Life goes on. So I feel centered. I feel energized. I feel committed. And it keeps me feeling like I have a sense of purpose today. That's where all of this is led. And if I can just change the life of 1 or 2 people and give them hope and realize that you can do it. If I can do it, I'm nobody special. I'm not wealthy. I don't have any special connections. I didn't even have the internet. If I can do it, other people can do it. Yeah. I want to add this too. I didn't do it alone. Back when I got the phone call, every homicide survivor dreads, which is the death notification. I got a phone call after 10 days after he'd been missing. My husband had been missing 10 days. Day and night, I worried, I paced. Nobody could tell me anything. And I got a phone call from a detective, Marlis Landeros, and she asked me to come down to police headquarters. She was the first woman of color in a high-ranking position in the Detroit Police Department. This woman, I don't know what I would have done without her. She was so intuitive. She knew when not to talk. It's like she could read my mind. She knew how much information I could take and when to stop talking because I couldn't take another sentence. She went above and beyond. She literally, literally propped me up in the morgue when I had to identify his remains. She didn't have to do that. She didn't even have to be there. But she went into the booth with me. She stood at my side. She literally propped me up. And she made it as palatable as you possibly can under the circumstances. I'll never forget, she said to me as we were crossing the threshold, she said, "You can do this. It will be brief and you won't be alone. But this way you'll know he's never coming home." And she described to me what it was going to be like. And then she was spot on. She also showed up with me at the preliminary exam. I think that was part of her job, although I'm not 100% certain. But as I was on the witness stand, she was in the gallery, and I lost my train of thought at one moment. And I just looked over, and she gave me the slightest smile and nod. That's all I needed. And I could finish my sentence. Well, she made such an indelible imprint on me that years later, I'm talking 35 years later, I got a phone call from Detroit from her daughter, who told me that she had been killed in an accident related to her job. She'd been T-boned. And she asked me to give her eulogy. And I was honored. So I did. I flew to Detroit, and my older daughter, who was then living in New York, said, "Mom, I know what Detective Landeros means to you, and I don't think you should go through this alone." And she said, "I'm going to meet you in Detroit." So she flew in to be with me during the funeral. That's the kind of daughter she is. And she was at my side during the whole thing. And that was very emotional to see her in a casket. But I want to sing her praises because it's due. I mean, I don't know how much recognition she got on the job. I have no idea. But she was amazing. I just can't emphasize enough the people put in my path afterwards. The people I've met, the things that have happened have been so incredibly positive. You know, like I said, Javier Leveda was there when I needed to do the podcast. And it's like these things just keep falling in my lap. And for that, I'm grateful. And I want to give back.
Yeah. I think, well, first of all, you're 73, you look great.
Thank you.
But I think you've already changed lives just because, you know, what you said, your daughter, you adopted daughters, you know, and how how they're showing you how much they love you is a reflection of how much you love them and how much you put into them. Um, so I think that's amazing in and of itself.
I have to tell you a quick story about them if I have a moment. When they were little, like 4 and 5.5, they knew their mom had been murdered. I never met a secret. I mean, you could tell by us looking at us, they're not my biological children, but they knew that they were adopted. And they kept wanting to go to this cemetery near my house. And I'm like, why do you want to go? That's kind of weird. And I kept finding excuses not to go. And finally I said, okay, we'll go to the cemetery. So they were too little to read, and they kept having me read the headstones. And finally, after about 45 minutes, I said, okay, kids, it's getting cold and dark. We need to go. And my little one, Elise, she said to me, "Mom, we can't go yet. We haven't found it." And I said, "Found what? What are we here for?" And she said, "I want to find my mom's grave." And I'm like, oh, that's kind of obvious now that I think about it. And I said, "She's not buried here, honey. She died in another city." And she started crying. And she said, "Then we're never going to find it." And I said, "Well, I can't promise you I can find it, but I can promise you I'll try." And I had that little thing that they give you out at a funeral that gets the person's name and date of birth and death. I don't know what you call it. And the social worker gave that to me. She wasn't supposed to because it was a closed adoption, but it had the mom's name on it. So I called the church where she had the funeral service, explained who I was. They said, "Oh yeah, we heard the children got adopted together. They weren't separated." And I said, "No, that was a condition. I would take two or none. I wasn't going to separate them." And she put me in touch with their grandmother in North Dakota, who started writing me. And I wrote her back, and I said, all I want is a picture of their mom and to know where her gravestone is, because someday they're going to want to go there, and I don't know where it is. And she told me she'd been cremated, and so there was no gravestone. But I remember when I got this box in the mail of all the photographs, and I brought them home, and they got to look through them, and started laughing hysterically because they'd never seen themselves bald. But we became so close, me and their biological family and me, that they took them on vacations. They were there to help with the birth of my grandchild. So I felt like I was adopted by them. It worked out really well.
I actually love that story. I love that. So I wanted to ask, so it sounds like a lot of people helped you throughout your process. Even when you were doing things that you didn't do it to necessarily help yourself, but it helped you in return.
It did.
So it's almost like you were guided in a way, which I think is
That's what it
so
feels like. Yeah.
is so
It's
cool.
not something I would have thought of doing on my own. In fact, when Holly recommended it, I'm like, I don't even listen to podcasts. I don't know how to do them.
Yeah,
I found the podcast community is very supportive. I didn't expect that.
yeah.
So I'm glad I did it.
I think it's maybe because it's filled with like creative people who are just trying to do what they're, inspired to do. And when you around inspired people, I think it just like amplifies everything. So I think,
Yeah.
um, so what was the one conviction that you held throughout everything? Like what was that one thread that just kept you going and kept you strong?
I remember that clearly. The one conviction I had was that giving up was not an option. There's no future in that. Zero. None. That's a dead end. So that was not something I was going to do. And I think the best revenge is success. And I didn't have any idea at all how that was going to look, how long it was going to take, what I was going to do. That was all very murky. I just knew that the best revenge is success. And somehow, some way, I was going to pivot this into something positive. And I had to take it a day at a time, be open to what crossed my path, and take a leap of faith on occasion to get there. That was absolutely certain in my mind. And I thought it'll fall into place as it falls into place. But giving up was never in my vocabulary. Mm-mm.
I love that. So for those watching who are like, okay, so you don't give up and you're not sure what you're going to do, what was your first step?
Say to myself, I'm going to take my control back. I'm tired of the media stealing from me. I'm tired of what those two defendants took from me. I got to take control back. And my friend, this sweetheart that she is, she knew that the media was really pestering me. So she said, here's a key to my back door. You got the guest room upstairs. You can use it whenever you want, at any time of the day or night. No questions asked. Just tiptoe up the back stairs and it's yours. And I'm like, sweet. And I remember one night being in her guest room watching the leaves falling outside, on the shadows of the leaves on the wall. And I thought, I'm going to take control back. This is it. So that's when I decided to change my name. My name is legally not Canty anymore, but that's what I go by socially. I'm going to sell my house and move. I'm going to change career directions. Now we're doing my life on my terms. And it was a painful decision because I love Detroit. My friends were there. My relatives are buried there. I had very pleasant childhood memories of it. I went to school there. I got my degrees there. I was that's where I met Detective Landeros. I mean, I love the music. I love the history, the grassroots organizations, the grittiness of it, the beauty of it, the oldness of it. There was a lot I was giving up. It wasn't an easy choice, but it wasn't the same anymore. And so I moved away, and that was the beginning of the new chapter when I moved away. I did feel like a fish out of water. I went from Detroit to a teeny tiny little town in the Midwest that had a newspaper about the size of a paper napkin. And the biggest crime is a bounce check.
I love
I
that.
knew nothing about cows and corn and silos and all that, but the people embraced me and took me in, and I found I loved teaching.
Yeah,
So that was a plus. Met
yeah.
some good people.
So that took courage to like completely uproot yourself and put yourself in another environment. What did you learn about yourself in that process, because that takes a strength that a lot of people, that takes a lot of strength and courage.
I think it taught me humility because coming from Detroit, I was like, I know all kinds of stuff and I'm a can-do person. And then I get there and I'm like, I don't know nothing about corn and pigs and cows and silos. And the students caught on to that and they would like one of them said to me, and I stupidly believed him, did you know it gets so hot in here in August that the corn pops in the field? I go, really? He goes, no. So it taught me humility. There was a lot I did not know about life. Um, it also taught me that there are good people out there. You know, everybody treated me so well. And it just allowed me to exhale. I felt gratitude that I had a second lease on life. I remember one night sitting outside in a summer evening, and I had never seen fireflies before because there was no light pollution. And I'm like, well, this is cool. This is really cool. So it taught me what I didn't know. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. So it taught me humility and gave me a sense of optimism being there.
At what point did you say, you know what, I'm proud of myself?
Mm. I think it was when my daughter said that, when she was helping me with my cancer treatment, when she said, Mom, you help, you saved my life and I would save yours. I think that was a real big moment for me.
Yeah, that's actually profound. Um, okay. So I do want to, I saw that you have these books and I saw the trailer. So cool. I want to give you just a few minutes to just talk about your books, just so people are aware of them.
Yeah, there's a couple books. Well, the first one is more of a true crime memoir. I had tried to sell it through a traditional publishing house, and they said they didn't know where to shelve it. Is it true crime? Is it a memoir? They didn't know what to do with it. So I said, I'll do it on my own. But it's called A Life Divided. And that title comes from not only that moment in time that divided my life into when I got the death notification, but it's also how he died because he was buried in 3 different graves. And that's what I had to observe in the morgue. So a life was divided. My life was divided. His life was divided. And my intention of that book was to speak to the part of homicide that doesn't get talked about. True crime focuses most of the time on the deed, the perpetrator, and a little bit on the victim and a little bit on the court process. It acts like once the court verdict is in, or the person gets sent away to prison or found not guilty, that's the end of the story. And that's the beginning of the story for us, for the homicide survivors. I wanted to put a spotlight on that and say, well, wait a minute, hold on. This is a life-changing moment for a lot of people. In fact, there's a statistic that says for every homicide, has been estimated that between 8 and 10 people are deeply and immediately impacted by that death. That's a whole lot of people when you consider there's 20,000 murders in the country a year, which is down from where it was. So I wanted to put a spotlight on that and give some people some hope about, again, I can do it, you can do it. The second book is more of a reference book, and it's called What Now? Navigating the Aftermath of Homicide and Suicide. And it could have easily been an 800-page book. I narrowed it down to 450. It was with a lot of effort. I made it that slim. My editor wanted me to have 3 volumes, and I said, no, people in this state of mind will lose the volumes. They can't even remember their name. So asking them to keep track of 3 different books is beyond, no. Let's make it big and get it done with. And they can always skip the chapters that don't apply to them. Like, for example, there's a chapter on crime scene cleanup. That won't apply to everybody. Or a chapter on grief in children. That won't apply to everybody. But the way it's organized is to take you through this process sequentially. So starting with the moment of impact, the death notification, dealing with the media, planning a funeral, the legal process, the social fallout, the physical fallout, the financial fallout, and on down the line to parole and advocacy. If you go that route, not everybody does. And my intention was to give a blueprint to say, this information is out there, people, but it is so fragmented, so hard to find, and you have no energy or time to pull it together. I want to do that for you between these book covers and pull it into one place to at least give you a head start where to go for this information. And it's got pages and pages of resources in there. It has, and I want to also add that 9 people contributed to it, because I'm not an expert. I mean, there's a chapter in there on what to do if you're wrongly charged with or convicted with the murder of your loved one. Well, I consulted with a couple of attorneys on that. I'm not an attorney. I wanted to make sure it was accurate. I called up this guy Cold in Chicago, who's a well-known defense attorney, and said, I just need 2 minutes of your time. I want to read this list. I want you to let me know if it's accurate. Is that okay? And he goes, yeah. So I read him the list. He added one item I hadn't thought of. And I said, can I use your name? He goes, yeah. Everybody was so nice to me. I had a chapter on there, what to do with the house that you inherit that is in probate, because if a person is murdered, they could leave their stove on in there and have their dog inside the house. And if there's no relative with a key, what do you do if you're their friend? Well, if you break in, you're going to be charged with trespassing and breaking and entering. If a relative doesn't want to come into town to deal with it, you going to let the dog die? You going to let the house burn down? So I had a chapter in there on that. There's all kinds of nuances that people don't consider unless they've been through it. And so I tried to make it robust. I tried to make it practical. And I've already started a list of, if I ever redid this book and updated it, what I would include. Yeah. But I'm happy with it as it is. And I want it to get in the right hands. I want it to get in the hands of crime victims who are just reeling from homicide or suicide, because they're in no place to figure this out. And it is a steep learning curve. And you can get a lot of bad advice out there from people who've never been through it.
Yeah. It sounds like you found yet another way to help people.
That's my goal. That's what I wanted to do.
Okay. So I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I just have one final question for you.
Sure.
It doesn't even have to be related to what we discussed today. What's the one piece of advice you could give another woman watching this today?
Do not go this alone. I tried that. I didn't speak of it for 30 years. That's a long time to keep my mouth shut. If I could do things differently, if I could do it over again, I wouldn't have done that. I made a couple of good friends where I had moved, and they never knew this about me. And I think that was a missed opportunity. I mean, I'm full of pride. A lot of people are. We don't want to look vulnerable. We don't want to be a burden to other people. But you know what? You pick the right person, they don't feel like they're a burden. You're a burden to them. So pick them wisely, but don't go it alone. And if you're given genuine offers of help, take them. You can stay in charge of it. I mean, there's a whole chapter in the book on when friends offer help, what to do to keep you in charge, but let them help you. People want to help. They just need some guidance on what you need and how to do it. So that would be my one piece of advice: is it takes a community to get past this, and you don't do it alone. It's the hard way.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
You're so inspirational and so strong. And I know you're just going to just keep knocking it out the park and helping so many people.
I hope. I don't hear a lot of feedbacks, but I hope it's out there and that people are feeling supported. That's my goal.
Awesome. Well, have a good day, and thank you all for tuning in.